In the outer regions of Galactic Alliance territory, there were facilities that did not appear on civilian maps. They were not prisons. They were not military bases. They were places where information was extracted with precision, efficiency, and, according to official doctrine, minimal harm. Pain, in the Alliance, was considered a biological signal. Nothing more, nothing less. And like any signal, it could be amplified. The interrogation complex on Station Keltar 9 floated in silence above a dim orange gas giant. From the outside, it was an unremarkable structure, a cluster of armored modules linked by narrow transit spines, its exterior panels matte black to reduce thermal signature. Inside, everything was clean. White light, smooth surfaces, no sharp edges, no stains, no sounds except the quiet hum of environmental systems and the distant rhythm of diagnostic equipment. This was a place designed not for cruelty, but for control. Every process here was measured, every response recorded, every subject treated as a neurological equation waiting to be solved. At the center of the complex, in Chamber 7, sat the device that had built the facility's reputation across 3 sectors. It was officially designated Neural Resonance Interrogation Platform, Model 4.3. Among personnel, it had a simpler name. The chair. The chair did not cut. It did not burn. It did not restrain through force beyond what was medically necessary. Instead, it interfaced directly with the subject's nervous system. A lattice of adaptive emitters mapped neural pathways in real time. Once synchronized, the system could amplify sensory feedback, specifically nociception, the neural process responsible for pain. The subject experienced no physical injury, no tissue damage, no lasting neurological harm, only sensation. Amplified, precise, unavoidable. The underlying principle was simple. Every sentient nervous system had limits. Pain, beyond a certain threshold, overwhelmed cognition. Decision-making collapsed. Emotional regulation failed. Self-preservation instincts took control. And when survival instincts activated, cooperation followed. The chair did not torture. It accelerated biology. Across the Galactic Alliance, the statistics were well known. Average resistance time by species. Kethari, reptilian, high baseline tolerance 2 minutes, 11 seconds. Varn collective, distributed cognition 1 minute, 3 seconds before network collapse. Dral war caste, combat adapted mammals 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Synth biological hybrids, system shut down at 90 seconds. The longest recorded resistance time in Alliance history was 3 minutes, 18 seconds. That record had stood for 43 cycles. No species had ever reached 4 minutes. Because at extreme neural overload, the mind did what it was designed to do. It broke. Senior interrogation specialist Velkon had overseen more than 200 sessions during his assignment to Keltar 9. He did not enjoy the work. He did not dislike it. To him, it was procedure. Velkon belonged to a species that valued cognitive order above emotional expression. His elongated frame remained motionless for long periods, his narrow sensory crest adjusting only when analyzing new data. His voice rarely changed tone. His movements were efficient and deliberate. He believed in systems. And the chair was a perfect system. No unpredictability. No improvisation. No cruelty driven by emotion. Only calibrated neurological pressure applied until cooperation became the subject's most rational choice. Chamber 7 reflected that philosophy. The chair stood at the center of a circular platform, its surface smooth and metallic, restraints integrated seamlessly into its structure. Above it, a halo of emitters adjusted continuously, invisible fields mapping neural activity at the molecular level. Around the chamber, observation stations displayed real-time data. Pain signal amplification curves, cognitive stability indices, stress hormone projections, neural overload thresholds. Everything was measurable. Everything was predictable. Earlier that cycle, Velkon had overseen the interrogation of a captured Veskari operative. The Veskari were considered resilient by Alliance standards, predatory physiology, redundant neural pathways, strong pain tolerance. The session began at standard intensity. At 42 seconds, the subject began vocal distress. At 1 minute, 19 seconds, motor coordination degraded. At 1 minute, 52 seconds, the subject attempted compliance. At 2 minutes, For seconds, the subject provided full operational data. Session complete. No complications. No anomalies. The system functioned exactly as expected. It always did. The chair did not fail. Biology did. Because regardless of species, evolutionary history followed the same pattern. Pain existed to protect the organism. When pain became overwhelming, survival demanded one thing above all else. Make it stop. And in an interrogation environment, there was only one way for a subject to achieve that outcome. Cooperation. Velkan had once reviewed cross-species neurological studies compiled by the Alliance Science Council. The conclusion had been unanimous. No sentient nervous system could maintain coherent cognitive resistance under sustained maximum nociceptive amplification. Not reptilian, not mammalian, not avian, not aquatic, not synthetic organic hybrids. The threshold varied slightly. The outcome did not. 3 minutes. That was the biological wall. Beyond it, resistance ceased to exist, which was why the new subject scheduled for Chamber 7, that cycle generated no particular concern. The file contained limited information. Species designation, human alliance classification, emergent, pre-standard integration physiology, oxygen-breathing mammalian biped neural structure, centralized, non-redundant pain tolerance, unknown. The species had minimal exposure to alliance systems. Minimal neurological research available. Minimal combat data. Velkan reviewed the biological summary once, then archived it. A mammalian nervous system. Centralized. Emotion-driven. No distributed cognition. No redundant pathways. Estimated resistance time. Under 2 minutes. Preparation protocols began. Medical staff calibrated the chair's neural mapping systems for human neurochemistry. Technicians loaded adaptive response algorithms. Observation stations initialized baseline recording. Chamber 7 returned to its usual silence. Clean, bright, controlled, predictable. Across the complex, escort units began transporting the subject. Commander Aisha Okafor of the United Earth Defense Fleet had been in Alliance custody for 9 hours. She had not yet been exposed to the chair. She had not yet been briefed on interrogation procedure. She had not yet been evaluated for resistance behavior. All of that would occur shortly. Velkan stood at the observation platform, reviewing the session schedule. Routine. Standard. No deviations expected. Behind the glass, the chair waited. It had never failed. It had never needed to. Because every species, eventually, reached the same conclusion. Pain could be endured, but only for a limited time. And then, the mind chose survival. Velkan finalized the session authorization. Transport confirmation appeared on the display. Subject arrival, 90 seconds. He turned toward Chamber 7. Calm, certain, prepared to observe another nervous system reach its limit. Like all the others. Like every species before. 3 minutes. At most. The transport corridor leading to Chamber 7 was quiet. Not silent. Nothing in the facility was ever completely silent, but the sounds were controlled. The steady hum of environmental regulators. The distant pulse of energy cycling through containment systems. The soft, synchronized footfalls of escort drones moving in perfect formation. At the center of that formation walked Commander Aisha Okafor. Her hands were restrained in a low-field containment loop. Not painful, not restrictive enough to impair movement, just enough to prevent sudden motion. She walked without resistance. That was the first irregularity noted in her file. Most newly captured subjects displayed at least one of 3 responses: aggression, panic, or withdrawal. Even trained operatives tended to show elevated motor tension, tight shoulders, erratic breathing, micro-movements associated with fight-or-flight activation. Okafor's gait was steady, measured. Her eyes moved constantly, not in frantic searching, but in controlled observation. She tracked door placements, sensor nodes, the spacing between escort units, the location of overhead emitters. When the escort turned left instead of right at a junction, her gaze flicked briefly to the corridor signage. She was mapping. In the observation room above Chamber 7, Velkan reviewed her vitals as they streamed in from the transport monitors. Heart rate, elevated but stable. Respiration, controlled. Stress hormones, high but not spiking. No signs of panic response. No signs of dissociation. No signs of shock. Velkan adjusted the display, overlaying predictive behavioral modeling. The system estimated a 78% probability of trained resistance conditioning. That was expected. The subject held command rank within a military structure. Training improved resistance time. Training did not change outcomes. The chamber doors opened. Okafor stepped inside. She paused, not from hesitation, from assessment. Her eyes moved across the room, taking in the central platform, the overhead emitter array, the observation glass. Her gaze lingered briefly on the chair. Most subjects focused on the restraints. Okafor focused on the emitters. Velkan marked a note. Situational analysis under stress, high. The escort units released the containment loop. Okafor rotated her wrists once, testing circulation. No sudden movement. No attempt to run. She looked up toward the observation glass. She could not see Velkan, but she knew someone was there. Water, she said. Her voice was dry but steady. No demand. No pleading. A request. Velkan signaled approval. A technician entered the chamber and handed her a hydration unit. Okafor drank slowly. Not urgently. Small measured swallows, conserving intake. When she finished, she handed the unit back. Thank you, she said. The technician hesitated for half a second before exiting. Velkan recorded another note. Social regulation intact. No emotional escalation. Medical scan initiated. A soft blue field passed over Okafor as she stood in place. The diagnostic system returned a rapid summary. Dehydration mild. Muscular fatigue moderate. Minor contusions. No fractures. No internal bleeding. Neurological scan. Elevated cortisol. Elevated adrenaline. Cognitive activity stable. No impairment detected. Velkan examined the neural pattern overlay. The subject was stressed, but the pattern showed controlled stress, not uncontrolled activation. Another anomaly. Okafor spoke again, this time toward the ceiling. Where am I? No response was given. After a moment, she nodded once, as if confirming her own assumption. Interrogation facility, she said quietly. Not a question, a conclusion. Velkan began the pre-session evaluation sequence. Audio channel opened. Commander Aisha Okafor, he said, his voice calm and even. You are currently in the custody of the Galactic Alliance Security Authority. You will undergo a standard neural interrogation procedure. Okafor turned slowly toward the observation glass. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked a single question. Will it cause permanent damage? Velkan checked the protocol wording. No. She considered that, then nodded. Okay. No bargaining. No threats. No statements of loyalty or defiance. Just acceptance. Velkan paused for 0.6 seconds before continuing. Preparation began. Technicians entered the chamber and guided Okafor toward the chair. She walked without resistance. When instructed to sit, she sat. The restraints adjusted automatically around her wrists, ankles, and torso. Neural contact nodes aligned along her spine and at the base of her skull. Okafor tested the restraints once. A controlled movement. No struggle. Comfortable, she asked. The technician did not answer. Velkan noted the question. Use of humor under stress. Probable. Baseline, neural mapping initiated. The emitter halo activated, projecting a scanning lattice around her head and upper body. On the observation displays, a three-dimensional model of her nervous system began forming in real time. Human neural architecture appeared simple compared to many Alliance species. Centralized brain. Linear spinal distribution. No redundant processing clusters. No distributed cognition nodes. No biological safeguards against overload. Velkan reviewed the structural summary. High efficiency. Low resilience. Estimated maximum resistance time updated. 1 minute, 47 seconds. Okafor closed her eyes. At first, Velkan assumed anticipatory stress. Then he noticed the breathing pattern. Slow inhale. Controlled exhale. Even timing. The respiratory monitor confirmed it. She was deliberately regulating her breathing. Velkan accessed the Human Behavioral Database. Cross-reference returned. Military survival training. Stress control techniques. Pain anticipation management. Probability of trained conditioning increased to 91%. Baseline calibration began. A low-level sensory signal was introduced, well below discomfort threshold. Most subjects reacted immediately, startled by the unfamiliar neural input. Okafor did not move. Her breathing remained steady. When the calibration increased slightly, her jaw tightened. Heart rate rose by 8%, but she did not open her eyes. She was preparing. Velkan studied the Cognitive Stability Index. Most subjects showed rising panic before the session even began. Okafor's cognitive pattern showed something different. Focus, narrowing attention, reduction of external sensory processing. She was attempting to control what she experienced. Velkan made one final note before authorization. Subject demonstrates active psychological resistance strategy. He paused, then added, expected outcome unchanged. All systems reported ready. Neural synchronization complete. Pain response amplification calibrated to human neurochemistry. Technicians cleared the chamber. The doors sealed. Only Okafor and the chair remained inside. Above, Velkan placed his upper limb against the authorization interface. Session begins, he said. The timer activated. Midnight. The first signal was introduced. A controlled increase in nociceptive feedback. Standard starting intensity. Well below overload threshold. On the central display, Okafor's neural response spiked. Her muscles tightened. Her fingers curled slightly against the restraints. Her breathing paused for half a second, then resumed. Slow, measured, controlled. Velkan watched the Cognitive Stability Index. It dropped slightly, then stabilized. He leaned closer to the display. Because most subjects did not stabilize. Most subjects escalated. Panic fed the pain response. Fear amplified perception. Control deteriorated almost immediately. Okafor's pattern did the opposite. Her neural activity narrowed. Focused, as if she were isolating the sensation. Managing it. Velkan checked the timer. 1 minute and 12 seconds. Still within expected range. Still early. Biology always won. It always did. He increased the intensity and began the observation that, by all statistical models, should have been routine. Estimated time to compliance. Under 2 minutes. The intensity increased according to standard protocol. At this stage, most subjects began vocalizing. Pain, when amplified beyond natural limits, overwhelmed conscious restraint. Even trained operatives lost control of breathing, posture, and sound within seconds of escalation. Commander Aisha Okafor did not scream. Her body reacted immediately, muscle tension along the shoulders, forearms tightening against the restraints, her jaw locking hard enough to shift the alignment of her teeth. Her heart rate jumped. Her pupils dilated. The neural display showed a sharp spike in nociceptive activity, but there was no vocal response. Her eyes remained closed. Her breathing, after one brief disruption, returned to a slow rhythm. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Even. Measured. Intentional. Velkan watched the respiratory monitor. That pattern was not instinctive. It was trained. The human database confirmed multiple stress regulation methods used by military personnel, controlled breathing to reduce panic response, lower heart rate, and prevent cognitive overload. Most species did not possess such techniques, because most species had never needed them. Pain, for the majority of sentient life, was an emergency state. For this subject, it appeared to be a condition to be managed. 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Intensity increased again. This level typically produced immediate vocal distress. Okafor's back arched slightly against the chair. Her fingers curled tightly, knuckles blanching as blood flow restricted. Her breathing faltered for 2 cycles. Heart rate climbed. Then, she began counting. Velkan detected subtle lip movement. Audio amplification confirmed it. 4, 5, 6, 7. Quiet. Barely audible. Steady. She was not reacting to the pain. She was pacing something. Velkan overlaid cognitive activity with behavioral prediction. The model did not recognize the pattern. Most subjects entered escalating panic within the first 5 minutes. This subject's panic indicators were decreasing. Fear response was being suppressed. Pain perception remained high, but emotional amplification was dropping. That combination was unusual. Pain without panic typically did not occur. 12 minutes. Intensity adjustment. The chair increased neural amplification by another increment. This level pushed most species toward neurological overload within 30 seconds. Okafor's entire body tensed. Her shoulders shook. A tremor moved down her arms. For the first time, a sound escaped her throat. A short, sharp exhale. Not a cry. Not a scream. A controlled release of breath. Her breathing resumed its pattern. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Count. Velkan reviewed the Cognitive Stability Index. It had dropped, but instead of continuing downward, it had leveled off. Then, slowly, it began rising. He checked the data for error. Diagnostics returned normal. The subject was stabilizing under increasing pain load. That was not consistent with any known neurological response model. 18 minutes and 25 seconds. The medical monitor flagged elevated muscle strain. Sweat accumulation increased. Skin temperature rising. Stress hormones high, but no longer climbing. The curve had flattened. Velkan leaned forward slightly. Biological stress responses typically escalated continuously under sustained overload. Plateauing suggested adaptation. That should not have been possible this early in the session. Inside the chair, Okafor's awareness had narrowed to a single process. Breathing. Counting. Pain existed, but she was no longer tracking its intensity. Pain was information. Noise. Background. The numbers mattered more. 23. 24. 25. If she lost the count, the pain would take the space. So she did not lose it. 25 minutes. Standard protocol required escalation. Velkan increased intensity. The neural response spike was immediate and severe. Okafor's head tilted back. Her breathing stopped for nearly 2 full seconds. Heart rate surged past safe training thresholds. Her hands tightened against the restraints hard enough to trigger pressure warnings. For a moment, Velkan expected collapse. Instead, she forced the breath out, then drew another. Slow. Controlled. The count resumed. 1, 2, 3. She had restarted the sequence. Resetting. Velkan opened the historical comparison database. He selected species with the highest known resistance profiles. Then he overlaid their first-hour patterns. Every curve showed the same progression. Rising panic. Rising instability. Cognitive collapse. Okafor's pattern was different. High stress, but decreasing emotional volatility. Increasing cognitive focus. The system flagged the session as a behavioral anomaly. 34 minutes and 10 seconds. Technicians began monitoring more closely. One requested a system integrity check. Velkan authorized it. All systems reported optimal performance. Neural mapping stable. Amplification accurate. No signal distortion. No feedback loop. The chair was functioning perfectly. The anomaly was biological. 41 minutes. Another escalation. This level typically forced compliance within 60 seconds. Okafor's entire body shook under the load. Her breathing pattern broke. For the first time, a strained sound escaped her, half a gasp, half a suppressed cry. Her heart rate spiked again. Cognitive stability dropped sharply. Velkan watched closely. This was the expected collapse point. 30 seconds passed. Then 40. Then 60. The stability index stopped falling. Then, slowly, it rose. Her breathing returned. Slower than before. More deliberate, but controlled. She did not open her eyes. She did not speak. She did not request the session to stop. 50 minutes. The room atmosphere shifted. Technicians spoke less. Data screens were checked more frequently. Velkan did not yet feel concern. But the session had moved outside statistical norms. Most subjects had complied by this point. Those who had not were typically unconscious. Okafor was neither compliant nor unconscious. She was enduring. 55 minutes and 30 seconds. Microcapillary rupture detected around the eyes. Minor. Within acceptable limits. Muscle tremors increasing. Sweat saturation high. Pain levels, by neural measurement, severe. But cognitive markers remained intact. Working memory active. Attention focused. Emotional centers suppressed. Velkan recorded a new note. Subject demonstrating active cognitive compartmentalization. 59 minutes and 40 seconds. Standard escalation threshold reached. Velkan hesitated for 0.8 seconds. Then increased intensity. The timer crossed the 1-hour mark. 1 hour. Okafor's body reacted violently. Her back arched. Her fingers curled tight enough to trigger restraint strain alerts. Her breathing stopped. Heart rate spiked. Neural overload indicators flashed. This was the point. Every species broke here. 30 seconds passed. Then 40. Then 60. Her chest moved. A slow inhale. Then another. Her body settled back into the chair. Her breathing resumed its rhythm. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Count. Velkan stared at the display. The cognitive stability index was rising again. Not rapidly, but steadily. The system processed the data, then displayed a message rarely seen during active interrogation. Subject remains cognitively intact after 60 minutes. Velkan increased the intensity again, because at this point, the session was no longer routine, and the human had not even opened her eyes. Protocol dictated escalation. At the beginning of the second hour, the resonance chair crossed from severe pain into sustained overload conditions, levels designed to overwhelm any adaptive response a nervous system might attempt. Velkan increased the amplification. The neural spike was immediate and extreme. Commander Okafor's entire body locked rigid against the restraints. Every major muscle group contracted at once. Her fingers curled inward, forearms shaking with continuous tremor. Her breathing stopped. Heart rate surged past the upper training thresholds recorded in her physiological profile. For 3 full seconds, her neural stability index dropped in a steep, accelerating line. Technicians leaned forward. This was the collapse curve. Then the drop slowed. Then stopped. Then, slowly, the curve leveled. A second later, her chest moved. A sharp inhale. Then another. Her breathing returned. Not smooth. Not comfortable. But controlled. Velkan ran an immediate diagnostic. Signal integrity, optimal. Pain amplification, accurate. Neural mapping, stable. There was no equipment error. The subject was experiencing exactly what the system was delivering, and she was stabilizing under it. 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 40 seconds. Physical stress indicators continued to rise. Sweat saturation reached maximum measurable levels. Muscle tremors had shifted from intermittent to continuous vibration along the arms and shoulders. Capillary rupture expanded across the whites of her eyes, visible even through partially closed lids. Stress hormone levels were extreme, but they were no longer increasing. The biochemical curve had flattened. Velkan zoomed in on the endocrine response. The human body was no longer escalating its emergency reaction. It was sustaining it. That pattern appeared only in endurance-adapted organisms under prolonged strain, but not at this intensity. Inside the chair, Okafor was no longer counting. Numbers required precision. Precision required attention. Attention was becoming difficult to maintain, so she changed the task. Breathing. In. Out. Slow the air. Slow the heart. If the body slowed, the pain slowed. That was the rule. She had learned it years ago. Pain was loud, but panic made it louder. So panic had to go first. 1 hour and 14 minutes. Velkan observed a shift in neural activity. The sensory cortex remained highly active, processing amplified pain signals. But activity in the limbic system, the emotional processing centers, was decreasing. That should not have been possible. Pain normally triggered escalating emotional response, fear, distress, panic. The human brain was suppressing that pathway. The system flagged the pattern. Emotional dampening detected. Is she losing consciousness? One technician asked. Velkan checked. Cognitive awareness markers remained active. Working memory intact. Attention focused. No signs of shutdown. No, Velkan said. She is reorganizing. 1 hour, 19 minutes, and 30 seconds. Another escalation. The amplification increased beyond levels used in standard compliance protocols. At this threshold, most species experienced cognitive fragmentation, thought loops breaking apart under neural overload. Okafor's reaction was immediate and severe. Her head jerked slightly against the support brace. A strained sound escaped her throat, low, involuntary. Her breathing pattern broke again. Heart rate surged. Cognitive stability dropped sharply. For 12 seconds, the curve fell toward collapse. Then it stopped, then began to rise. Velkan accessed the predictive model. The system returned an error. Behavior outside known parameters. 1 hour and 26 minutes. The neural activity map showed a new pattern. Large regions of the prefrontal cortex, areas associated with external awareness, were decreasing activity. At the same time, internal visualization networks were increasing. The human was redirecting attention inward. Sensory input was still present, but it was no longer the dominant focus. Inside her mind, the chamber was gone. The chair was gone. The pain was still there, but it no longer filled the space. Instead, there was water, a shoreline, waves moving in and out, steady and predictable. Each breath matched the motion. In, out. If the waves stayed steady, the rest would hold. She stayed with the waves. 1 hour, 33 minutes, and 45 seconds. Velkan replayed the neural data twice before accepting the conclusion. Self-induced dissociation, he said. Several technicians turned toward him. Most species experience dissociation only as a precursor to collapse, a defensive neurological shutdown when stress exceeded survival limits. This subject was inducing it voluntarily and maintaining cognitive function while inside it. 1 hour 38 minutes and 10 seconds. Medical monitoring flagged a new concern. Despite extreme pain levels, muscle tension was decreasing. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Her hands loosened against the restraints. Heart rate began to decline, not to normal levels, but lower, stabilizing. The system recalculated perceived stress load. It was dropping. Velkan stared at the display. The chair was delivering increasing pain. The subject's body was responding as if the pain were decreasing. That suggested only one possibility. Her perception of the signal was changing, not the signal itself. 1 hour and 44 minutes. Another escalation. Velkan increased intensity beyond standard interrogation limits. This level was typically used only for short-duration neurological stress testing. The neural spike was violent. Okafor's body jerked once, a full involuntary contraction from shoulders to ankles. Her breathing stopped completely. Heart rate surged. Cognitive stability plunged. Technicians began preparing emergency intervention. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Then, her chest expanded. A slow inhale. Then another. The stability index stopped falling. Then rose. Again. No one spoke for several seconds. The room was quiet except for the steady flow of data. 1 hour 51 minutes and 30 seconds. The emotional response graph had nearly flattened. Fear indicators minimal. Panic response absent. Stress hormones high but stable. Pain signals extreme. But the emotional amplification that normally made pain unbearable was almost gone. Velkan reviewed the human psychological database again. Meditation practices. Endurance training. Long-duration stress exposure. Some humans voluntarily subjected themselves to sustained discomfort for psychological conditioning. The database included a phrase. Pain is temporary. Reaction is optional. Velkan did not understand the concept, but the neural data suggested the subject did. 1 hour and 56 minutes. Okafor's eyes moved beneath her closed lids. Rapid internal processing. Visualization networks active. External sensory processing minimal. The chair was no longer the primary focus of her mind. It was background. 1 hour 59 minutes and 50 seconds. Velkan increased intensity again. The timer crossed into the final seconds of the second hour. 2 hours. Okafor did not react. Her breathing remained slow. Her muscles remained loose. Her neural response spiked, but her cognitive stability did not drop. Instead, the system displayed a new status. Pain perception high. Distress response minimal. Velkan leaned closer to the display. Because the data suggested something the chair had never encountered before. The subject was not resisting the pain. She was adapting to it. And for the first time since the session began, Velkan felt something outside clinical certainty. Not concern. Not yet. But the recognition that the second hour had produced something the system had never recorded. The human nervous system was no longer fighting the overload. It was learning how to live with it. By the beginning of the third hour, the session had already exceeded every standard projection. Most interrogations did not last this long. Most nervous systems did not remain organized this long. Most subjects, by this point, were either compliant, unconscious, or neurologically unstable. Commander Aisha Okafor was none of those. Her breathing remained slow. Her muscle tension remained low. Her cognitive stability index, though fluctuating, continued to recover after each escalation. The chair increased intensity again. Her neural response spiked sharply. Her body reacted with a brief tremor along the shoulders, then settled. Velkan opened the comparative archive. He searched for any session exceeding 90 minutes. Only 2 records appeared. Both had ended in sudden neurological collapse. Neither subject had remained conscious. Okafor had been conscious for more than 2 hours, and she was stabilizing faster with each cycle. 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 40 seconds. A new behavior appeared. Her lips began to move again. Audio amplification increased. 3, 7, 3, 7, 3, 7. Not sequential counting. A repeating pattern. Velkan analyzed the rhythm. The numbers matched her breathing cycle. Each inhale aligned with the first number. Each exhale with the second. She was synchronizing cognition, respiration, and attention into a closed loop. A cognitive anchor. Pain signals remained extreme, but the brain's attentional networks were no longer prioritizing them. The chair was delivering the signal. The subject was refusing to give it mental space. 2 hours and 15 minutes. Velkan ordered another escalation. This level exceeded standard interrogation limits by 12%. Technicians hesitated. He repeated the order. The system complied. The neural spike was violent. Okafor's back pressed hard against the restraint frame. Her hands clenched fully for the first time in several minutes. Her breathing stopped. Heart rate surged. Cognitive stability dropped sharply. For a moment, the curve mirrored historical collapse patterns. Technicians watched the timer. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Then the curve slowed. Then stopped. Then began rising. Again. One technician spoke quietly. That should not be possible. Velkan did not respond. He was already reviewing the long-term projection model. The system returned a new estimate. Predicted time to cognitive failure, unknown. That field had never displayed that value before. 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 30 seconds. Medical monitoring flagged sustained microtremor across the entire upper body. Muscle fatigue indicators rising. Localized oxygen debt in the forearms and shoulders. Physically, the subject was under extreme strain, but her heart rate was falling, not to normal, but to a controlled endurance range. Her body was shifting from emergency response to sustained load mode. The same physiological pattern observed in long-distance endurance activity, except the stressor was not physical exertion. It was continuous neural overload. Inside her mind, Okafor had reduced the world to two things: breath, pattern. The numbers helped, but the rhythm mattered more. If the rhythm held, everything else could stay outside. Pain came in waves. If she did not chase it, it passed. If she reacted to it, it stayed. So she did not react. 2 hours and 30 minutes. Velkan initiated a secondary protocol. Introduce variability, he said. Instead of steady amplification, the chair began altering intensity in irregular pulses, brief spikes followed by rapid reductions. The method was designed to disrupt adaptation. Most nervous systems could tolerate steady stress. Unpredictability destroyed coping strategies. The first irregular spike hit. Okafor's breathing broke immediately. Her shoulders jerked. Heart rate surged. Cognitive stability dropped. The next spike came sooner than expected. Then another. Then a longer gap. Then a sudden surge. The pattern was deliberately chaotic. For the first time since hour 1, the stability index began falling continuously. Technicians leaned forward. This was working. The human's pattern was breaking. Her breathing lost rhythm. Her lips stopped moving. Her neural activity showed rising emotional response. The curve dropped. Then, it slowed. Then stopped. Then, slowly, it began rising again. 2 hours, 37 minutes, and 50 seconds. Her breathing returned. Not the same rhythm as before. A new one. Slower. Longer pauses between breaths. Her lips began moving again. Not numbers this time. A different pattern. Velkan increased audio gain. It was a phrase. Repeated. Quiet. Steady. Still here. Pause. Still here. Pause. Still here. Velkan felt a brief, unfamiliar hesitation before issuing the next command. Increase variability amplitude. The spikes became more severe. Pain levels surged rapidly, dropped, then surged again. Her body reacted more strongly now. Visible tremors, brief involuntary movements. But the cognitive curve no longer followed the physical reaction. It dipped, then recovered. Each time, 2 hours and 45 minutes. The observation room was no longer quiet. Technicians spoke in low voices. Additional monitoring systems were activated. A secondary medical officer entered. Velkan authorized extended recording. This session had moved beyond interrogation. It was now a behavioral anomaly study. 2 hours, 51 minutes, and 20 seconds. Her eyes moved again beneath closed lids. Internal visualization activity increased. External sensory processing dropped further. The chair's input was no longer the dominant signal in her cognitive field. The system labeled the state. Deep dissociative focus. Yet awareness markers remained active. She was not escaping consciousness. She was narrowing it. 2 hours and 56 minutes. Velkan increased intensity again, near maximum safe levels. The neural spike was extreme. Her body reacted violently. Full muscular contraction, breath halted, heart rate surging into dangerous territory. This time, the stability index dropped farther than before, lower than any previous recovery point. Technicians prepared emergency shutdown. 10 seconds. 15. 20. Then, her chest moved. A slow inhale. Then another. The stability curve stopped falling, then began rising. Once more. 2 hours, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds. Velcon did not increase intensity again. The timer approached the third-hour mark. The system processed accumulated data. A new behavioral assessment appeared on the display. Subject demonstrating progressive stress adaptation. Velcon read it twice, because the phrase implied something no interrogation system had ever needed to consider. Adaptation over time. 3 hours. The third hour ended. Commander Okafor remained conscious. Breathing. Focused. Stable. The chair had increased intensity 7 times. Introduced unpredictability. Exceeded standard interrogation limits. The subject had not complied. Had not collapsed. Had not lost cognitive function. Velcon opened a command channel to supervisory control. For the first time in his career, he requested additional oversight. Because this session was no longer an interrogation, and for the first time since the chair had been activated, Velcon was no longer confident the system was in control. Supervisory authority joined the observation channel without comment. No interruption was issued. No reduction order. Only one instruction appeared on Velcon's display. Continue. Full documentation. That alone marked the session as extraordinary. The fourth hour began at a sustained intensity level that exceeded standard interrogation limits by nearly 20%. At this threshold, most nervous systems entered irreversible destabilization within minutes. Commander Okafor's neural response spiked sharply when the level increased. Her shoulders tightened. Her hands clenched once. Her breathing stopped for 2 full seconds. Heart rate surged. Cognitive stability dipped. The observation room watched the curve. Then, as it had every time before, the decline slowed, stopped, and began to rise. 3 hours, 9 minutes, and 30 seconds. Her body began to change. The tremors decreased. Muscle tension lowered. Her shoulders settled back against the frame of the chair. Heart rate declined again, entering a controlled endurance range. Medical monitoring displayed a status rarely seen under extreme load. Physiological stabilization under sustained stress. Velcon studied the neural activity map. Pain processing remained extremely high, but emotional amplification had dropped even further. The limbic system, fear, panic, distress, was nearly quiet. The subject was experiencing intense pain without emotional escalation. For most species, pain and fear were inseparable. For this one, they had been uncoupled. 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 10 seconds. Then a new sound appeared. At first, technicians thought it was environmental interference. A faint vibration in the audio channel. Velcon increased gain. The sound came from the chair. From the subject. A low tone. Soft. Steady. Commander Okafor was humming. The tone rose and fell slowly, matching her breathing. No melody at first. Just a sustained vibration. Then the pattern became clearer. A simple tune. Repetitive. Even. Her breathing aligned with it. Inhale. Tone rising. Exhale. Tone falling. Velcon watched the neural data. The auditory cortex showed internal reinforcement activity. The sound was not random. It was a self-generated feedback loop. The subject was using her own voice to regulate neural rhythm. Pain signals continued to arrive, but attention networks were now partially synchronized to the sound instead. 3 hours and 18 minutes. A technician spoke quietly. Should we suppress vocal output? Velcon considered the question. If the humming was aiding stabilization, removing it might disrupt adaptation. But this session had already moved beyond standard interrogation logic. Negative, he said. Continue observation. The humming grew steadier. Not louder. Not strained. Calm. Almost relaxed. The cognitive stability index rose another 3%. 3 hours, 23 minutes, and 45 seconds. Supervisory control opened a direct inquiry. System integrity? Velcon ran a full diagnostic. Signal accuracy, optimal. Amplification delivery, precise. Neural mapping, stable. No latency. No distortion. He responded. System functioning within operational parameters. A pause. Then, then explain subject condition. Velkan did not respond immediately, because there was no existing classification for what he was observing. 3 hours and 29 minutes. Another escalation. Near maximum sustained intensity. The neural spike was severe. Okafor's humming stopped abruptly. Her body tensed hard against the restraints. Heart rate surged. Breathing broke. Cognitive stability dropped. For several seconds, the curve mirrored collapse patterns. Then, her chest expanded. A slow inhale, and the humming returned. Softer, but steady. The stability curve began rising again. 3 hours, 35 minutes, and 20 seconds. The emotional response graph had flattened almost completely. Fear markers minimal. Distress response negligible. Stress hormones still elevated, but no longer fluctuating. Her physiology had entered a sustained load equilibrium. The chair was no longer driving her stress higher. It was maintaining it. Velkan felt the first trace of something unfamiliar. Not concern, not fear, but uncertainty. The chair's effectiveness depended on escalation. Each increase should push the subject closer to collapse. Instead, the increases were producing smaller and smaller disruptions. The system was no longer overwhelming the subject. It was becoming predictable, and predictability allowed adaptation. 3 hours, 42 minutes, and 10 seconds. Her face had changed. The tension that had been present during the first hours was gone. Her jaw was relaxed. Her brow smooth. Her breathing slow and regular. If the neural data had not been visible, she might have appeared to be resting. Pain levels remained extreme, but her body no longer reacted as if they were. 3 hours and 48 minutes. Supervisory control issued another inquiry. Is subject losing awareness? Velkan checked cognitive markers. Working memory active. Attention networks engaged. Decision processing regions functional. No, he replied. Awareness intact. A longer pause. Then why is distress decreasing? Velkan watched the humming pattern, watched the stability curve rise another fraction, and answered with the only explanation the data supported. The subject is adapting. 3 hours, 52 minutes, and 30 seconds. Another escalation. Maximum sustained safe level. The neural spike registered. Her body reacted slightly. The humming wavered, then steadied. The stability index dipped, then recovered. The system recalculated predicted collapse probability. It dropped. 3 hours, 57 minutes, and 10 seconds. Technicians had stopped speaking entirely. Every display in the room showed the same impossible pattern. Extreme pain input, minimal distress response, stable cognition, gradual adaptation. 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds. The fourth hour approached completion. Commander Okafor's humming continued. Slow, even, controlled. Her breathing matched it perfectly. Her heart rate remained in endurance range. Her muscles rested against the restraints instead of fighting them. The chair was delivering near maximum neural overload, and the subject appeared calmer than she had during the first hour. For hours, the system displayed its hourly summary. Pain level, critical cognitive stability, high emotional distress, minimal. Velkan read the final line twice, because the implications were no longer procedural. If a subject could remain calm at maximum input, then escalation no longer had meaning. And for the first time since the session began, the chair no longer felt like a tool of control. It felt like a stimulus the human was learning to ignore. By the beginning of the fifth hour, the interrogation had reached a condition the system was never designed to handle. Maximum sustained intensity. Full neural synchronization. No further safe escalation available. The resonance chair was operating at its highest continuous output, and Commander Aisha Okafor's physiological state remained stable. Her breathing was slow. Her muscles rested against the restraints. The humming continued, soft and even, rising and falling with each controlled breath. Pain signals across the neural display remained at critical levels, but the emotional response graph was nearly flat. The system registered distress. The subject did not behave as if she felt it. Velkan initiated the only remaining variable, duration. If intensity could not break the subject, sustained exposure might degrade cognitive function over time. The chair continued, unchanged, unrelenting, for hours 11 minutes and 20 seconds. Microfatigue indicators appeared across multiple muscle groups. Localized oxygen debt, elevated lactic accumulation. The body was under severe strain, but heart rate remained controlled. Breathing remained steady. Cognitive stability remained high. The human nervous system had fully transitioned into long-duration endurance mode. For hours and 18 minutes. The humming stopped. Not abruptly. Gradually. The tone faded with her last exhale. For several seconds, the chamber was silent except for the hum of the chair's emitters. Her breathing continued. Slow. Controlled. Then her eyes opened. The movement triggered immediate attention across the observation room. For the first time since the session began, Commander Okafor focused outward. Her gaze moved slowly, adjusting to the chamber lights. She looked at the emitters, the restraints, the ceiling. Then she turned her head slightly toward the observation glass. Her eyes fixed directly on it. On Velkan. Most subjects, when reaching this stage, displayed one of two behaviors: pleading or compliance. Okafor did neither. Her expression was calm, not defiant, not exhausted, simply attentive. Her lips moved. Audio amplification increased automatically. Her voice was rough from dehydration and prolonged breathing control, but steady. Hey. No response was given. Standard protocol prohibited interaction during active neural pressure. She waited, then spoke again. You're still there, right? The observation room remained silent. Velkan did not respond. Interaction was not required. The chair would continue. The subject would eventually comply. That was the model. That had always been the model. Okafor's gaze remained on the glass. She watched it for several seconds. Then she asked, "Do you have children?" No one moved. No one spoke. Several technicians looked toward Velkan. The question had not been anticipated. Subjects did not initiate personal conversation during maximum neural overload. Subjects did not initiate conversation at all at this stage. Most subjects were incapable of coherent speech. Velkan reviewed the cognitive markers. Language centers active. Attention stable. Emotional tone analysis, neutral. There was no manipulation pattern detected. No distress request. No bargaining structure. The question had not been tactical. It had been conversational. Okafor continued when no answer came. I do. A pause. Her breathing remained slow between sentences. One daughter. Another breath. She hates vegetables. Pain signals continued at maximum. Her heart rate did not change. Her emotional state did not shift. She spoke the way a person spoke during ordinary conversation. For hours, 24 minutes, and 40 seconds. The observation room atmosphere changed. The anomaly was no longer physiological. It was behavioral. Subjects under extreme pain did not reference personal life. They did not initiate social context. They did not attempt empathy. Because the nervous system under overload narrowed toward survival. This subject's cognition was expanding outward. Okafor's eyes remained on the glass. You should call them, she said quietly. If you can. A pause. They worry. Velkan experienced a measurable delay before returning his attention to the data displays. His species did not experience emotion in the human sense. But attention disruption had occurred. The subject had redirected cognitive focus outward. And, unexpectedly, the observers had followed. For hours and 31 minutes. Medical analysis showed no change in pain levels. No reduction in neural load. No system fluctuation. The chair continued at maximum output. Yet the subject's conversational tone remained steady. No strain. No escalation. No distress. A technician spoke quietly. Should we mute audio? Velkan considered the request. Standard protocol allowed it. But the session was no longer standard. Negative, he said. Continue full capture. For hours, 38 minutes and 20 seconds. Okafor spoke again. Not continuously. Not rambling. Short sentences, spaced between controlled breaths. You've been running this a long time. A breath. That's a long shift. Another breath. You should eat. Her gaze moved briefly around the chamber, then returned to the glass. You look tired. Velkan checked emotional analysis. Still neutral. No aggression. No sarcasm markers. No psychological manipulation pattern. The system categorized the tone as concern. The observation room was completely silent now. No one was looking at their secondary displays. All attention had shifted to the subject. For hours, 47 minutes, and 10 seconds. The cognitive stability index increased another 2%. Velkan examined the correlation. Social cognition activity had increased. Self-referential stress processing had decreased. The subject was no longer focused primarily on her own condition. She was focused on others. Pain had not been removed. It had been deprioritized. For hours and 52 minutes. Supervisor Control opened a private channel. Why is subject initiating social interaction? Velkan responded after reviewing the neural map. Attention redirection, he said. A pause. Then he added, she is not resisting the pain. Another pause. She is ignoring it. For hours, 57 minutes and 30 seconds. The fifth hour approached its end. Commander Okafor remained awake, speaking occasionally, breathing steadily, emotionally stable, pain levels unchanged. No compliance request. No distress signal. No cognitive degradation. For hours, 59 minutes and 50 seconds. Velkan looked at the predictive model again. The system had updated its assessment. Interrogation effectiveness, decreasing. He read the line twice, because it implied something the chair had never encountered before. The longer the session continued, the less effective it became. 5 hours. Hourly summary appeared. Pain level, critical cognitive stability, high emotional distress, negligible subject behavioral status, social engagement. Velkan did not increase intensity. There was nowhere left to increase it. For the first time in the operational history of Chamber 7, the subject was not reacting to the interrogation. The subject was engaging the observers. And the focus of the room was no longer the chair. It was the human. The sixth hour began without escalation. There was nothing left to increase. The resonance chair was already operating at maximum sustained output. Every emitter functioned at peak tolerance. Neural amplification held steady at levels that, for any other species, would have produced rapid cognitive collapse or emergency shutdown. Commander Aisha Okafor remained conscious. Her breathing was slow. Her posture relaxed against the restraints. Her eyes were half open, no longer fixed on the observation glass, no longer actively scanning the chamber. Her attention had turned inward again. 5 hours, 8 minutes, and 30 seconds. Physiological monitoring showed a state that did not exist in standard interrogation models. Heart rate, stable endurance range. Respiration, slow and rhythmic. Muscle tension, minimal. Stress hormones, elevated but no longer fluctuating. Pain signal input remained critical, but the body had stopped responding as if the input were escalating. The human nervous system had reached equilibrium. Velkan reviewed the system logic. The chair was designed around a simple principle. Increase pressure until the subject's resistance exceeded biological limits. But resistance was no longer increasing. The subject had stopped resisting. She had reorganized around the pressure instead. The chair was no longer forcing change. It was maintaining an environment. 5 hours, 14 minutes, and 10 seconds. Commander Okafor's eyes closed fully. Her breathing slowed further. Long inhale. Long exhale. Extended pause. The pause lengthened, then lengthened again. A technician spoke quietly. Cognitive drop? Velkan checked. Awareness markers were still present, but cortical activity was shifting. External attention networks were decreasing. Internal regulation networks remained active. The pattern looked familiar, but it did not belong in an interrogation profile. 5 hours and 18 minutes. The system flagged the state. Sleep onset indicators detected. The room went still. Sleep under maximum neural overload was not possible. Pain signals at this intensity activated continuous alert response in every known species. The nervous system should have been forced into constant vigilance. Instead, Commander Okafor's brain activity was transitioning into early-stage sleep rhythm. 5 hours, 19 minutes, and 30 seconds. Velkan ran a diagnostic. Signal integrity, optimal. Amplification, unchanged. Pain delivery, continuous. The chair had not reduced output. The subject's nervous system was choosing to disengage anyway. Her breathing deepened. Heart rate dropped slightly. Muscle activity decreased further. Then, her head tilted slightly to one side. The micro-adjustment of someone settling into a more comfortable position. 5 hours and 22 minutes. Sleep stage confirmation. Slow wave pattern emerging. The system displayed a warning. Subject unconscious without neurological distress. This was not collapse. This was not shutdown. This was natural sleep. No one spoke. Technicians stopped moving entirely. The only motion in the observation room came from the continuous flow of data across the displays. Pain levels, critical. Stress input, extreme. Consciousness, sleep. Velkan reviewed historical records again. No species had ever lost consciousness naturally in the chair. When consciousness ended, it was always due to overload failure, neural collapse, protective shutdown, emergency medical intervention. Never sleep. Sleep required a sense of safety. Sleep required the nervous system to determine that the environment did not require active defense. The human brain had made that determination, while under maximum sustained neural pain amplification. 5 hours, 28 minutes, and 40 seconds. Supervisor control opened an immediate channel. Explain condition. Velkan did not answer immediately, because the system did not contain a category for what was happening. Finally, he responded. The subject has habituated to the stimulus. A pause. Then, the chair is no longer perceived as a threat condition. 5 hours and 31 minutes. The implication spread through the observation room without being spoken. If the stimulus was no longer perceived as a threat, then the interrogation mechanism had failed. The chair depended on distress, on urgency, on the nervous system's need to escape. The human nervous system had stopped trying to escape. It had accepted the condition, normalized it. 5 hours, 37 minutes, and 20 seconds. A technician asked the question no one else had voiced. Should we terminate? Velkan watched the stability curve. It was steady, flat, no degradation, no compliance likelihood increase. The predictive model updated again. Probability of interrogation success, declining. He did not answer immediately, because termination meant acknowledging the chair was no longer effective. And that had never happened before. 5 hours and 42 minutes. Commander Okafor shifted slightly again in her sleep. Her breathing remained deep and even. Her heart rate remained stable. Pain levels remained unchanged. The chair continued its output, and the subject slept through it. 5 hours, 46 minutes, and 30 seconds. Supervisor command appeared on the primary display. Terminate session. Velkan placed his limb on the control interface. For a moment, he did not activate it, because the data on the screens represented something larger than a failed interrogation. The system had reached its limit, and the human had adapted beyond it. 5 hours and 47 minutes. The emitters powered down. Neural amplification dropped to baseline. Pain input ceased. The stability curve did not change. Commander Okafor did not wake. 5 hours and 50 minutes. Medical monitoring confirmed full physiological stability. No neural damage. No cardiac irregularities. No structural stress failure. Only extreme fatigue. The chair, for the first time since installation, had completed a session without producing compliance, collapse, or cognitive degradation. It had produced adaptation, then normalization, then sleep. 5 hours and 58 minutes. Velkan began compiling the preliminary session summary. He paused at the operational assessment field. After reviewing the predictive model one final time, he entered the only conclusion supported by the data. Interrogation method ineffective for human subjects. 6 hours. The 6th hour ended. Commander Aisha Okafor slept peacefully in the chair. And for the first time in its operational history, the resonance chair had become something it was never designed to be. Not a weapon, not a tool of pressure, but background noise. Commander Aisha Okafor woke gradually, not with a start, not with confusion. Her breathing shifted first, deep sleep rhythm giving way to lighter cycles. Her fingers moved slightly against the restraints. Her head lifted a few centimeters, then settled again as her eyes opened. The chamber lights had not changed. The chair had not moved. The only difference was the absence of pain. For several seconds, she remained still, as if confirming that absence. Then she exhaled slowly. Okay, she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. In the observation room, no one spoke. Medical scans showed normal waking patterns. Heart rate increasing to baseline. Cognitive activity rising smoothly. No disorientation. No neurological aftereffects. The subject had endured 6 hours of maximum neural overload and woken as if from a long rest. Okafor looked up toward the observation glass. You done? She asked. A pause. Then, after another breath. Because I could really use food. Velkan did not respond immediately. Instead, he turned to the system interface and opened a new file. Session Classification Review, Human Subject. The interrogation had ended, but the implications had not. Section 1, Medical and Neurological Outcome. Data Summary. No structural neural damage. No cognitive impairment. No memory fragmentation. No emotional destabilization. No long-term stress indicators beyond fatigue. The chair had delivered sustained maximum nociceptive amplification for 6 hours. The human nervous system had stabilized, adapted, normalized the stimulus, entered natural sleep. Velkan paused before entering the next line. Subject exhibited progressive stress adaptation rather than degradation. Section 2, Behavioral Progression. Velkan reviewed the timeline. Hour 1, Controlled breathing, cognitive compartmentalization. Hour 2, Self-induced dissociation. Hour 3, Pattern anchoring under variable stress. Hour 4, Self-regulation through vocal resonance. Hour 5, Social cognition under maximum load. Hour 6, Habituation and sleep. The progression showed a consistent pattern. The subject did not resist the pain. She reorganized around it. Each stage reduced the psychological impact of the stimulus. Each hour made the chair less effective. Velkan accessed the Alliance Biological Database. Search term: Human Endurance Behavior. Results expanded rapidly. Long-distance running under extreme environmental stress. Voluntary exposure to cold, heat, and deprivation for training. Meditation practices specifically designed to reduce pain perception. Military survival programs involving prolonged discomfort and psychological isolation. Historical records of humans remaining functional under conditions that would incapacitate most known species. A pattern emerged. Humans did not avoid suffering. They trained for it. Velkan opened a secondary analysis window. Comparative species response model. Most species shared the same neurological strategy. Avoid pain. Escape pain. Submit if escape is impossible. Human response patterns showed an additional pathway. Endure pain. Adapt to pain. Continue function despite pain. Section 3, Strategic Implications. Velkan began a new section. The resonance chair functioned by exploiting urgency. Pain created a survival crisis. The subject cooperated to end the crisis. But the human nervous system had demonstrated an alternative response. If the crisis continued long enough, it stopped being a crisis. It became environment. And environments could be endured. He ran a projection model. Scenario: long-term detention under high-stress conditions. Result: human psychological stability increases over time if survival is assured. Second scenario: repeated exposure to coercive stress. Result: resistance probability increases with exposure duration. Third scenario: escalating pressure without physical harm. Result: subject adaptation likely. Compliance probability decreases. Velkan paused, then opened a broader strategic model. If humans adapted to pressure instead of breaking under it, then prolonged interrogation would fail. Prolonged imprisonment would fail. Extended conflict pressure would not degrade morale as expected. The species did not collapse under stress. It reorganized. Section 4, Cultural Factors. Velkan reviewed additional records. Human cultural expressions included phrases translated as, push through the pain. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Embrace the discomfort. Some humans voluntarily participated in endurance challenges involving exhaustion, cold exposure, and physical suffering. Not as punishment, as recreation. The database included psychological commentary. Human identity formation often linked to overcoming hardship. Velkan added the line to the report. Section 5, Operational Conclusion. Velkan began typing the final assessment. Pain-based interrogation protocols are ineffective for human subjects. He paused, then expanded it. Extended pressure increases psychological resilience rather than reducing it. Another pause, then the final statement. He read it twice before submitting. Humans are not resistant to pain. They are resistant to suffering. Transmission to high command. The full session record was attached. 6 hours of neural data. Behavioral analysis. Predictive modeling. Velkan added a final recommendation. Immediate policy adjustment advised. Human subjects should not be subjected to prolonged coercive stress. Negotiation protocols recommended as primary interaction method. After a moment, he added one more line. Escalation strategies are likely to strengthen resistance. Return to Chamber 7. Velkan finally opened the audio channel. Commander Okafor was still seated in the chair, alert, watching the glass. When the speaker activated, she tilted her head slightly. Yes, she said. Velkan spoke. Interrogation procedures have concluded. A brief pause. Then, food will be provided. Okafor nodded once. Good. Another pause. Then she added, almost conversationally, "Next time, you might want to start with that." As technicians entered the chamber to release the restraints, Velkan watched the human stand. Her movements were slow from fatigue, but stable, balanced, unbroken. The chair remained in the center of the room, silent, operational. For the first time since its installation, it had not failed mechanically. It had failed conceptually, because its design assumed a universal truth. That pain broke minds. The session with the human had demonstrated something else. Pain did not break all species. Some species adapted, and once adaptation began, pressure stopped being control. Velkan finalized the report. Priority classification, strategic. Distribution, high command. Subject line, human behavioral assessment, endurance protocol. Within one standard cycle, the Alliance would update its human contact doctrine. Interrogation procedures would change. Detention policies would change. Conflict modeling would change. Because the data supported only one operational conclusion. Humans were not a species to be broken. They were a species to be negotiated with. Immediately, the restraints released with a soft mechanical click. Commander Aisha Okafor did not move immediately. For a moment, she remained seated, hands resting loosely where the restraints had been, eyes closed, breathing slow and deliberate. Her body was heavy with fatigue, muscles stiff from prolonged immobility, nervous system still unwinding from hours of sustained overload. She rolled her shoulders once, flexed her fingers, then opened her eyes. The chamber looked exactly the same. Clean, bright, quiet. The chair stood behind her, silent now, its emitter haloed dark. If not for the dryness in her throat and the deep ache in her muscles, the last 6 hours might have felt unreal. She took one careful breath, then another. Still here. Good. The chamber doors opened. 2 technicians entered, moving cautiously, as if expecting instability or sudden movement. They carried a hydration unit and a sealed nutrition pack. Okafor watched them approach. No hostility, no fear, just observation. One of them extended the hydration unit. She took it immediately and drank, long and steady, emptying half before stopping herself. Slow, she reminded her body. Too fast would make it worse. She lowered the container and nodded. Thanks. The technician hesitated for a fraction of a second, then placed the nutrition pack in her hands. High-density ration. Alliance standard. She opened it without comment and began eating. Methodically, efficiently, every movement controlled, deliberate, the same discipline she had used in the chair. Fuel first, questions later. Above the chamber, Velkan watched. Medical telemetry streamed across his display. Heart rate stabilizing. Blood chemistry normalizing. Cognitive function fully active. No signs of emotional shock. No delayed panic response. No aggression. The subject's recovery pattern matched post-endurance exertion. Not trauma. Not breakdown. Endurance. Okafor finished the first portion of the ration and looked up toward the observation glass. She chewed slowly, swallowed, then spoke. So, she said. A short pause. Are we talking now? Velkan opened the audio channel. Yes. The human nodded once, as if that confirmed an expectation. Good, she said. Another bite. Another swallow. Then, conversationally. Because if that was your standard procedure, you should know something. Velkan waited. She met the glass directly. You gave me 6 hours to practice. There was no detectable hostility in her tone. No threat. Just a statement. Velkan recorded it. Because the predictive model updated immediately afterward. Future resistance probability increased. Medical staff entered to guide her from the platform. Okafor stood slowly. Her legs trembled once under her weight, then steadied. She rotated her neck, rolled her shoulders again, then stepped away from the chair without looking back. Her attention had already moved forward. The corridor outside Chamber 7 was quieter than usual. Personnel watched as she passed. Not openly, but attention followed her. The human walked between escorts without restraint. Not because she was free, because restraint was no longer considered necessary. Her behavior profile showed no impulsive aggression, no instability, no collapse risk. She walked the way she had entered the facility, observing, measuring, learning. Behind her, Chamber 7 was sealed. The chair powered down to standby mode. Maintenance diagnostics ran automatically. Every system reported optimal function. No hardware failure. No signal error. No deviation from operational parameters. The system had performed exactly as designed. Velcon entered the final operational note. Resonance chair performance, nominal. Then, after a pause, he added a second line. Operational outcome, ineffective. High command acknowledgement arrived 17 minutes later. Human interaction protocols were updated immediately. Priority changes included suspension of pain-based interrogation, prohibition of prolonged coercive stress exposure, mandatory negotiation first contact policy, revised conflict endurance modeling. The strategic summary attached to the update contained a single sentence extracted from Velcon's report. Extended pressure increases human resistance. Several cycles later, Chamber 7 resumed operation. Other species were processed. Other interrogations proceeded. The chair remained effective. The statistics returned to normal. 3 minutes. Sometimes less. Never more. A new notice was added to the system database. Species exception. Human. Operational advisory. Do not attempt endurance-based coercion. Negotiation recommended immediately. On a different level of the facility, Commander Aisha Okafor finished her second nutrition pack and leaned back against the wall of her holding quarters. Her muscles still ached. Her throat was still dry. Her nervous system still carried a faint echo of the chair's signal, like the memory of a loud sound after silence returns. She closed her eyes briefly, checked her breathing. Slow, steady, controlled. Still here. Good. The door opened. A diplomatic officer entered. No restraints. No medical team. No equipment. Just a translator unit and a data pad. The officer paused, then said, "The Alliance wishes to discuss terms." Okafor opened her eyes, considered that for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah," she said. "That's probably a good idea." Far above the station, the gas giant turned slowly in the dark. Inside Keltar 9, the resonance chair remained ready. Silent. Precise. Effective. For every known species. Except one. Because the Alliance had learned something during a single 6-hour session. Pain could control most minds. But some minds did something else. They endured. They adapted. And once they adapted, they stopped being controlled at all.